My name is Amanda Troxler, and I'm an attorney practicing in Los Angeles, and I work at Lazarus and Troxler. In all arrangements, both anonymous and known, it's important to have a legal contract between the donor and the recipient, because there's a lot of things that are addressed in a legal agreement that are not addressed in a consent form. The difference between a consent form and a legal contract is who the parties are. So if you fill out a consent form with your clinic, that's an agreement that you have with your clinic, and it's not a direct agreement between the donor and the recipient, which creates problems. Some of the things that are addressed in a legal agreement is the relinquishment of rights from the donor to the recipient, and what can be done with those embryos. Can they be redonated if there's excess embryos? Do they revert back to the donor? Can they be donated to research? How many embryos are being donated at a time? And one of the most important things that we address in an agreement is confidentiality and future contact. Future contact is a very important issue to deal with in the beginning and not later down the line. We have a lot of people who say that they just want to have a baby and then they'll figure it out later, which is very understandable, but sometimes it's harder to deal with those issues when they actually arise than if you had thought about them in advance. One thing to be aware of is that the child is not a party to the contract. The contract does not create any rights or obligations on the child. And with burgeoning technology, the likelihood of contact between the parties is very high. Children, as they grow up, there's the understanding that they may have expressed an interest in knowing the donors, and they may, and especially in embryo donation, they're likely to have full genetic siblings that they might also be curious about. And the question becomes whether the parties are willing to facilitate contact when those questions arise. A donor recipient should absolutely have separate independent legal counsel, and that's very important. Although this is collaborative and it's not contentious, the parties may have different interests, and they may not realize that from the get-go, but that can be explored through the contract. And each side deserves an advocate to put forth their interests. In an unknown arrangement, there's ways of facilitating contact. One of the benefits of each party having an attorney is that they want to have contact with each other, that the attorneys know each other, and each attorney knows who their client was and is able to contact that person. The other way you could facilitate future contact is there's the donor sibling registry that registers anonymous donations. There's also the opportunity to exchange anonymous non-identifying email addresses if people want to contact each other directly but are not yet comfortable in exchanging identities. And then we also address the possibility of open donations. Embryo adoption is often used interchangeably with embryo donation because I think for most people it's the idea of that they see the embryos as their potential children, and there's a lot of emotion that goes into them, and so the idea is that this is their child. It's hard to define embryos in that we sometimes define embryos as people, we sometimes define embryos as property. Most states have come down on the line that embryos are not just property because they have the potential for human life. They are property with special value. If somebody comes to me saying that they're looking to embryo adoption, we generally try to gently have them refer to it as embryo donation. And the difference between an adoption and a donation is that adoption refers to the adoption of a live child, and embryo donation, the rights are afforded to the recipient right away before the embryo is even transferred into the uterus. My advice to people who are looking into embryo donation is to do a lot of research to determine whether they want to work through a clinic program or whether they want to match independently. There's also programs that do open donations if that's what they're interested in. So the most important things you can do is empower yourself by doing research and determining what avenue is best for you.